For a more immersive experience, I recommend you wear headphones for this podcast. Welcome to Mil-Liminal, Episode 4, Mary Mary. This episode contains some content that may be emotionally distressing to some listeners. Please check the description for a list of trigger warnings. Hey there, listeners. It's me, your favorite spooky time gas station employee, Carol Green. Of course it is. I assume you know why you're here. When we last spoke, I told you about one of my stranger encounters with some of the, shall we say, locals around the area. It was weird, but these things happen a lot when you work at a place in the middle of nowhere that barely even exists at night. And something good that came from it was an idea. I had no direction and no idea what to do with my life when I stumbled upon the GasCo. And after my repeated run-ins with the creatures of the night, I thought, maybe one thing that could be something to fill my abundance of time would be a podcast. After all, I spent hours upon hours at night reading other people's spooky stories. Why not tell my own? It was a daunting thought, honestly. I had never really thought to tell my own stories to anything but my journal. I journaled a lot after I started working here. Somehow it helped. If I put my stories out there, I wondered, would there be others like me? If enough people heard my experiences, would someone else recognize themselves in some of their experiences in mine? Would I find out that I'm not as alone as I feel? Or is it just enough to flip the script, to control my own fate, to go from seen and not heard to heard instead of seen, to instead embrace that I'm a seer of things, to tell my own stories, my own narrative, in a way only I can control, to be perceived in a way I choose. Or maybe I just want to work out my life by talking out loud, while not really having anyone to talk to besides the adults around me, but they didn't know about the ghosts and stuff. I guess I really don't know my motivation here. Is it enough just to be? I think maybe it's time to talk about the before times, BG, before GasCo. To lay out the groundwork to try to figure out why things are the way they are and why I am the way I am. And tell you a little bit of the story of how all this came to be. I mentioned before that I've always experienced things, that it's just different now. Something changed. Whether it was me or the gas station, I guess I may never know. I can't really even put my finger on what's changed. When I was younger, most of my experiences were terrifying. Sometimes I even ended up hurt. Things do still interact with me at the gas station. But, well, it's almost like the way a customer would. I mostly sit and observe or point out a direction. Sometimes maybe a little harassed, but even the happenings here are a passing through. Maybe the difference is the liminalness of it all. Maybe when a haunted person enters a liminal space, things just move around them. Because it seems to me the truly terrifying things happened away from the gas station, in the woods or my childhood home. I also mentioned before that I think haunted places collect people, but I'm not sure about the pass-through places. Maybe that's the difference. What I haven't said is that as a person who sees, I know that most places are haunted in some kind of way. 'Cause that's what I am, I guess. A seer. And what I see is that most houses have a history, a gone wrong, a memory, and most buildings do what they do best. They contain. There's a million ghosts in New York City. So many that it's all muddled together. It's more difficult to haunt a place that's already haunted, to struggle over the energy sources, fighting through a million hands, a million memories, a million tragedies. But there's only a few in the tiny town tucked in the dark, shadowy woods of the PNW. And so the manifestation is more energy, more monstrous, dangerous. I think that's why cryptids keep to these places, the small, out of the way places. Small towns are sinkholes. I think only a person from a smaller, more rural area can understand this. If you grew up there, your family is probably there. Your roots are there, and you're stuck, whether you like it or not. Whether you go 1,000 miles away or not, it's always there, beating like a living thing beneath your scars, shifting through your veins like an illness you can't contain, bringing you back. I think that this is why I didn't go far. The beating of my heart was still in the small town I came from, and living on the fringes of it was both as close and as far as I could bear. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I grew up in the small town nearest to the GasCo. Picture book house, picket fence, high school football games and homecoming queens, and everyone knowing everyone. Perfectly manicured lawns, pretty flowers, and idealistic lives. Hardworking families. Everything appearing perfect to the outside eye. My life was perfect. But that's never really how it is it? That's why it's a cliche. Why it's how so many horror movies start. You never know what's going on behind those fences. Unless you live next door, and you can hear the yelling and the furniture slamming through the suburbia thin walls. But my house wasn't like that. My parents weren't violent. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. But what they had was just as sinister, and that was control. I was an only child, and because of that, I was my parents' whole life. Helicopter parents would be an understatement. How I looked, what I wore, who my friends were, everything carefully coordinated to be perfect to the outsider's eye. Because that's what mattered, right? What other people thought. My parents wanted to be parents. They wanted to be praised and show what a good job they'd done. But they did not want actual children, and they especially didn't want me. But the glory that they decided that I could bring the first time I took first in a toddler beauty competition made up for that, I guess. I was now there to show everyone how perfect and wonderful they were. A doll on the mantelpiece, earning my worth. I gotta tell you, listener, the mantelpiece is a lonely place. Now, I did have a lot of friends. I was friends with everyone, and everyone wanted to be friends with me. So how, you wonder, could I possibly be lonely? Well, numbers aside, there weren't too many who really knew me. The ones who bothered to know past skin deep were the scruffy kids, the scraped knees, football on the streets, ditching class kids, the punk boys in their clunky boots and roughed up jackets, the having fun kids, and I wasn't supposed to hang around them. God forbid I got my clothes dirty playing football, or wet and smelling like smoke 'cause I stood too close to a guy who actually wanted to listen to me speak. So I hung out with the cheer squad and the fancy hair jocks. And they were fun in their own way. I fit into that crowd well on looks alone, cheer captain and homecoming royalty. I don't hate that crowd. I was that crowd for a long time, but we didn't talk about much under the surface. That was on me, I suppose. They weren't the friends who knew about the ghosts. I'm going to tell you about one of my more significant experiences. I remember one time having a sleepover. I think it was the first time I ever had one at my place. It must have been middle school, 12 or 13 years old, I'm not sure. And it was my birthday. Fun fact, listener, I was born on the most unholy of days, October 31st. You can only imagine the ire that brought my parents. But there was no spooky Halloween parties and scary blood-spattered costumes for me. I was always some kind of fairy or angel. I wasn't even allowed to be a dead one. Anyway, that's besides the point again. My parents had finally gone off to bed, and we were left to our own devices. But here's the thing. Even the teeny bopper cheer squad wants to have a spooky good time on Halloween. So we were sneaky telling ghost stories. And they sucked, okay? We were children repeating the words of urban legends we'd heard or snippets of horror movies we'd seen as though they were our own. But it was fun, and it was the first time that Halloween actually felt like Halloween. It came to be my turn. I wasn't allowed to watch scary things, and it had never occurred to me to tell one of the experiences I'd had. I didn't want them to think I was crazy. So I told one of the stories that my childhood best friend and neighbor told me. The one about the girl in the mirror. Now the thing was, he would tell me the stories, and I would squeal and giggle and cover my ears and miss half the tale. So I wasn't sure on the specifics of why there was a girl in the mirror. I just knew that supposedly there was one, and supposedly you could evoke her to appear, covered in blood, by saying her name 3 times in the mirror in the dark. You know this story. Everyone has some version of it. So I told it. And of course, you know what happens next. We decided we just had to give it a try. My bedroom had a bathroom suite attached, so we were all able to gather in there side by side. 9 tweens smushed into the small room facing the mirror. We didn't have a candle, which, supposedly, according to the neighbor boy when I texted him to ask, we were supposed to light one first. Ignore the follow-up texts, Caro. Ignore the warnings. Is this a good idea? Ignore that he knew what would happen to someone like me. So instead, we brought a nightlight. One of those squishy ones that you squeeze to turn on, shaped like a kitten. And we stood facing the mirror, and we held hands, and held our breath, and silenced our giggles, and we chanted together, as you do. Bloody Mary. Nothing. Bloody Mary. Silence. Deep breaths. Do we dare? Bloody Mary. Silence. Heartbeats filled the air. One of my friends let go of my hand and laughed out a great, "Ha! See? Nothing. I knew it. My sister told me this story a few years ago." Smug. The other girls gasped and giggled, doubled over, and stifled fake screams. "Nothing there, see? Oh, come on. I thought I saw a flicker of something. You were so scared. Oh my God." I heard my name whisper in my ear. "Are you okay?" One of them asked. I was still staring at the mirror. I pulled my eyes away, looked at her, and collapsed. Too much sugar, my parents said. Too much excitement. They read the texts on my phone. I never had privacy with those things. Their house, their rules. I wasn't supposed to be friends with the boy next door. He was a bad influence. Grounded. They took my phone away. I heard them arguing in the hall. It was raining. I sat alone in the dark until a few days later. The doctor cleared me to go to school. Everyone asked, and I laughed and said I was low on blood sugar is all, that I got lightheaded, no big deal. They teased light-heartedly that it was Bloody Mary. I laughed and smiled and said they were probably right. The neighbor boy watched me from across the canteen with worried, knowing eyes. At night, I sat on my bed in the dark. I read books. I stared at the ceiling and at the blank walls. I did my homework. At school, I used my lunch break for cheer things and extracurricular. I studied. I got all A's. My parents made sure every moment was accounted for. Total routine. And I was lonely. Years passed. I was trapped, and the people who would understand, who could comfort me, weren't there to do it anymore. My parents made sure of that, driving a wedge between me and the friends they didn't approve of. And between that long ago Halloween night and now, I'd lost my best friend to tragedy. Why did you leave me here? My plans and my heart shattered. I was no stranger to grief. I was empty, and there was no one there to fill my heart back up again. Desperation, dear listener. I went into the bathroom late one night. It was cold outside, a sharp January chill, howling wind against window panes. They rattled occasionally and made me shiver. I was always a little cold anyway. I took the childhood nightlight with me. I had stashed it away where it wouldn't be found and set it on the vanity where I stared into the mirror. I touched my own face, leaned in, turning out the light, and looking at my ghostly blue reflection in the glow of the nightlight. I held my breath. Bloody Mary. It occurred to me that the reflection in the mirror probably wasn't whoever Mary was. There probably was no Mary. From what I knew, it was just a drink my parents liked on the weekend mornings that stank of vodka. This was probably something the house kept. I blinked, wide-eyed expression, staring back at me. Bloody Mary. It probably evoked because it was always there, and wanted to play along. It was trapped behind a mirror, after all. Maybe it was lonely too. I bit my lips, staring. Desperate. Stupid teenager. The feeling of adrenaline for something you know is a terrible idea running through my veins. I just didn't want to be alone anymore. Bloody Mary. My reflection shifted just like it had that Halloween night. I didn't scream and I didn't pass out. She was maybe a few years older than me. Her hair was darker, ringlets on her shoulders, features covered with a mask of dark liquid, blood dripping down on her white dress, reminiscent of horror prom queens of books and cinema. You know. I wondered why ghosts always wear white. They don't, I learned later. I wondered if she was bloody because that's what I'd asked for. I wonder if it was because that was how she died. She stared back at me, a reflection of my expression. I wiped my hand across my face, and she did the same, blood wiping from her cheek. I lifted my other hand, and she copied me. I heard a sound down the hall. My concentration broke, and I glanced away. She was gone. I tried again a few nights later. It seemed that she stayed as long as I was looking. I would cross and sit on the toilet seat without breaking eye contact. She did the same. We watched each other. We stayed silent, swaying slightly. Somehow, in the absence of anyone else, she became my comfort, the girl in the mirror who wasn't me. When I spoke to her, her mouth moved along with mine. She mimicked my movements exactly. She was my mirror image, except, of course, she wasn't. I didn't know if she was a memory kind of haunting or a real one. It didn't matter. I wasn't alone. In my eyes, she wasn't sinister like some of the other things that I saw or experienced. She wasn't sinister like the living, breathing people who locked me in my room for days when I didn't act how they wanted me to, or when they went on benders with the money that I earned. But I don't know. I wouldn't really have known sinister unless it was coming at me with tooth and claw. Undertones are lost on me. I sat and I talked. Fast whispers under my breath, confessions, secrets. Her lips moved silently with my words. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. Her flinching movements, nervous hair petting and playing with rings and bracelets mirrored mine. When I cried and told her of broken hearts, she cried too, tears leaving streaks on her cheeks, washing away the blood. Mine probably left mascara. It was like talking to myself, or nobody. But it helped because I could see her, and it helped because I could talk and say all of the things bottled up inside of me without fear of a journal discovered or phone or computer records checked. She was my privacy, and somehow I started to feel better. I told her everything, and maybe that was a mistake, to lay yourself out completely bare like that to the unknown. I told her I didn't know who I was, that I didn't know how I could figure it out anymore. That all the plans I had made, everything that I had planned in hushed tones behind the science building with my best friend were broken. My future was dashed, and I didn't know what to do next. I had no hope of escape. He was my courage, and I was left empty. Still, you know how sometimes you talk out loud and it fixes things. It helps you solve your own problems because you can lay them all out on the floor of your mind and work it out. Mary helped me by being a blank slate to work things out on, a sounding board to work out my ideas. I started to climb out of the darkness. One night, it was late. My parents were out and I was home alone, which was nice, but also a little spooky. And I was grounded for something, I don't remember what anymore. But there'd been a rash of break-ins in the area lately, and my parents had locked the doors. They'd locked my door so I wouldn't sneak out. What if the house burnt down? Insanity. Anyway, I was nervous, so to pass the time alone, I was sitting in my bathroom, talking to my reflection like a silly teenager on the telephone. And of course, because that's how these things go, isn't it? You know what happens next. It's just too obvious. I heard the crash of the window downstairs. I froze. Eyes wide, the whites visible all the way around my irises. Mary's reflection matched my own, face frozen in fear. I looked away towards the door and Mary remained. She didn't flicker out of existence like she usually did when I broke eye contact. I stood up and so did she. We approached the bathroom door and leaned our ear against it, listening. It made sense, honestly. My neighbor was the chief of police in my area, and he was out at the same party as my parents. Actually, most of the neighborhood were. And it was Friday night, so the other kids, they'd be out as well. It was a wonderful night to hit the houses around here in the upscale neighborhood. The cat was away. I could hear stomping and scuffling around on the floor level. I opened the bathroom door as carefully as I could, making sure not to make a sound. I crept into my room, and to my surprise, Mary followed, mimicking my movements, disappearing and reappearing in the reflection of my bedroom window, and then in the long floor-to-ceiling wardrobe mirrors. The stomping headed up the stairs, and my heart stopped. I looked around frantically, but I couldn't think. I had to hide. I had to do something. I was little, and I wasn't going to be any match against burglars if they found me. It also didn't help that I was familiar. I had been on many magazine covers and shoots by this point. I didn't know what someone would try, but my mind was running 1,000 miles a second, thinking about ransom notes and sinister strangers. I looked at Mary. She looked back at me. My terror doubled, reflected in the mirror. I ran to my window, but I couldn't get it open. The icy weather had formed and it was stuck. Maybe I could break it? Her reflection flickered in the icy window. My door handle rattled. She jerked her head towards the door, but I hadn't moved. She beckoned me. I still hadn't moved. I could hear the men murmuring and cursing. A locked door? What treasures could be behind that? Nothing, nothing, I whispered to myself, a useless kid. Tears dripped down my face, knowing that they'd ransack any place I could hide. I moved towards the closet, Mary mimicking me. And suddenly, she grabbed my arm somehow and pulled me towards her, while sidestepping past me, using force to push me through the mirror and taking my place. Raspy voice whispered, "Under the desk." It was like I had blacked out for a moment, disoriented, everything flipped. I caught myself. I obeyed, my body moving on autopilot, and crouched in the dark shadows of my mirrored room's desk. What had just happened? I watched, trembling all over. Did she trick me? Did she trap me? Did pouring out my heart to her for weeks give her the strength to betray me? I watched the scene transpire. Mary stood in my room, ruined bloody dress, trickles of dark liquid running down her face and arms, chin held high, shoulders thrown back, eyes sparked with certainty. The robbers barreled in, door broken down, and stopped dead in their tracks. They looked at her, and she looked right at them. And then she opened her mouth and screamed like I've never heard someone scream before. Not a scream of terror, a scream of rage. She clenched her fists and she took every ounce of her own fury out on those men. She screamed her rage, and she screamed with mine, my loneliness, my broken heart, my fear, and my rage. And she looked contorted, unworldly. She screamed until I thought my eardrums would burst. She was terrifying, and she was beautiful, and in my own terror, I think I might have blacked out. I awoke to a gentle sort of knocking and peeked out from under the mirror desk, head spinning, black dots swimming in my vision. Mary was standing there, dressed in white, free of blood, knocking gently on my wardrobe mirror. I got up and slowly moved towards her. She put her hand on the mirror and I pressed my own against it, and she wrapped her fingers between mine and pulled me back. My world blinked out for a nanosecond once again, while fluidly moving past me and putting us back in our proper places. And as she passed me, clean dress, bright-eyed and hopeful expression emptied out of all of her rage and pain and loneliness, I swear I heard her whisper, smile in her voice. Make a new plan. A way to save yourself and live. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Mil-Liminal, and be sure to follow social media or subscribe for updates. Want to know more now? This podcast is actually based on a webcomic, and you can read it right now for free on Tapas or Webtoon. Search for Mil-Liminal, a horror romance about me, Caro, my podcast, and my desperate attempt to win a grouchy barista's heart. Or for Seemingly Dark, a long-running supernatural comic full of ghosts, mysteries, and of course, I'm there too. Follow the creator Raptor Jules on Instagram or Twitter, or follow Seemingly Dark on Tumblr. Logo and music design is by SnakePixel on Twitter. Want to support the podcast? You can sign up for Raptor Jules' Patreon for monthly updates. A special shout out and thanks to my current Patreons, and hopefully, I'll see you soon.